Hello, Natalia. How's it going?
Hi, Arkin. So good to see you. How are you?
I'm good. It's been a while.
I know. I'm really glad we're catching up. It's been a lot of fun stuff.
Are you joining this session at the moment?
I was and still am in New York, diehard
Uh-huh.
East Coast, never leaving.
I love it. I'm actually really excited because, as you can recall, we met, I want to say last year, maybe, or like 1.5 years ago, thanks to Project 2.8. And I think, what you've been working on was something fascinating. And it was also like touching me a little closer to my heart as a, dog owner, I want to say a dog father, although, my beloved girl Zuzu is in Istanbul now. We recently celebrated her sixth birthday. So, it's time is just flying by. But I remember the first time you were just explaining your idea, your business. I was like, oh, this sounds exciting because I'm pretty sure Zuzu would love it. But, before going into, all these, and I'm pretty sure we'll be talking a lot more about Longsock. But, before, let's talk about you. Who is Natalia Yelsky?
What a good question. I actually have a very exciting personal update. I became a mom in 2024. So much.
My God, this is crazy.
I know.
Congratulations.
It's been kind of a crazy couple of years. Left a fancy consulting career to start a company and then became a mom. So I like to say that I'm a founder on both fronts, professional and
Oh my God, this is such a big news. I'm so happy for you. I hope your baby will have a beautiful, great life in the best in the healthiest way possible.
thanks.
Congrats again. So hold on, you said I moved on from a consulting life and then started my own company. Now I have my baby. But how was that decision? Like, you worked at BCG for some good time and then there gotta be a certain moment where you said to yourself, you know what? I will be doing something completely different and starting this company, which is now called Longsock, on my own. So, can you just walk us through those days a little?
Yeah. If there's ever a movie many, many, many years from now about me, I'm hopefully played by someone really cool like Kate Blanchett or I don't know, Sandra Bullock or something. In that movie, there's going to be a moment in which it's like a light bulb and you realize that this is the thing you want to build. In my experience, personal life, real life isn't quite like that. In my experience, it's a gradual journey. It's like little Lego blocks, and they're just stacking, and you're not necessarily following what they're stacking into. You're not really seeing the full picture in the moment until later you look back and you kind of see all the signs. The signs were there. And so for me, it was actually during my time at BCG. It was COVID. Picture yourself. Everybody's suddenly working from home. You have no more team camaraderie. You are by yourself, frequently in your bedroom, just on your laptop day in, day out. And it was depressing, frankly. And so I ended up getting a dog, like a lot of other people. I'd always wanted a dog. I grew up with a German Shepherd. I'm a big animal lover. And I started a community at BCG for other dog owners because everybody really wanted a space to connect about their interests. And for a lot of people, their dogs became their interests. So, it was just a handful of us kind of sharing pictures of our dogs in Halloween costumes at the beginning. And then slowly but surely, we started going to the Westminster Dog Show together. I brought in authors from kind of dog training books. I brought in dog trainers. I brought in some leadership at dog cognition labs at universities across the nation. And little by little, it grew into 1,000 people. I was spending so much of my time managing this community, and it gave me so much back. I found it so rewarding to see the real changes that happened in people's lives and their dogs' lives as a result of introducing all of this programming into their lives. And one consistent thing that I heard was enrichment, enrichment, enrichment. Every trainer talked about, every book talked about it. And it was like a light bulb moment. I was like, wow, we got to do more of this. I was doing this with my dog from very early days. And suddenly one day I just decided to try it. And BCG is an incredible place to work. And one of the things that they do is they have a program called Time for You, where you can apply and take 2 months off and explore whatever it is you want to work on, but you kind of stay with BCG, you retain your health insurance, things like that. And it gives you the option to try something else. And so I applied and I got these 2 months during which I told myself, if I build something, if I create something, then I will leave BCG and I will start a company. And I spent 2 months doing all the research, talking to other dog owners that I knew. And by the end of the 2 months, fortunately or unfortunately, actually designed the first prototype of this product. So I had to be true to myself. And that's how I decided to leave and leave BCG and go full time on figuring out how to commercialize this thing that I created.
That is amazing. What I've been realizing now that I'm listening you again is, and I think, for our audience as well, it might sound like, yes, there's this gradual journey of you maybe, kind of discovering what you want to build in this space. Because yes, it started kind of like a passion project as, you know, right as part of your full-time job, and it's growing. You obviously have this interest, something so personal to you, and then there's this 2 months so that you could test it or like you could understand and assess. But I think it's also going to be super stressful just knowing, okay, I have 60 days. Let's see, is it going to be how I envisioned it would be, or will it just not be how like I think it is obviously, with the time constraint, it sounds really stressful, but here we are. So maybe, when you take a look at those 2 months, what were some of the takeaways that made you feel like, Natalia, you know what? I think I should just focus on this full time. By the way, I didn't even for now ask like what Longsock does. Could you also maybe tell us a little more about that as you answer this question?
That's a perfect way to do it. So, it's a little bit, if this was a course, this is where I would put a little like exclamation point or a little light bulb next to what I'm about to say. I think as a new founder, it is very easy to get in the weeds on methodologies and spend a lot of time thinking and prototyping. And one thing that I learned that I hope to communicate to anyone who ever asks me for entrepreneurship advice or how to start a startup is spend less time thinking and more time testing. And so for me, it was super true. And in those 2 months, I divided my time between reading the research papers, talking to professors, talking to dog trainers. And that's an important part of the discovery. You're talking to experts, professionals, they have a perspective on what may be good for the dogs, what's healthy for the dogs. The other piece is talking to very real dog owners, and it's scarier. There's kind of like a common trope, I guess, that there's a wall of pain and behind the wall of pain is the knowledge you seek. It's a little bit like that. Talking to customers that aren't your friends, that aren't your family members, they're random people at a dog park is scary, but that's the people you learn from the most. And so to me, that's how Longsock was born, really. It wasn't in the research papers or the faculty conversations that I had. It was going out to dog parents and asking, well, what do you know about enrichment? What does that mean to you? What do you think of when I say enrichment? And what I heard consistently was, enrichment, it's when, you feed your dog things in a puzzle bowl or, a Kong or a Topple or all these tools. And consistently, most folks I talked to kind of equated enrichment to what I would describe as making it difficult for your dog to eat something. And it works really well, but my mission was a little bit different. I really wanted to get down to mental enrichment without the food. Like, what does it really mean to give our dog something to do that isn't related to them eating things? And there were a couple of conversations early on that I had. Mind you, nobody used the phrase scent training when I talked to them at the beginning. I don't think that crystallized as a positioning statement until significantly later. What it was at the beginning is, I do find it with my dog. I talked to someone who had 2 dogs and she said, I play find it games. And I was like, well, what are the find it games? And she's like, I take something they really care about and I hide it and then they go look for it. And, it may be food, but it may be a favorite toy. And that was the first time where I'd spoken to someone and they explained, they didn't use the word enrichment. They didn't use the phrase scent training or nose work. They just said, I play this kind of game with my dog. And that was the kind of the beginning of what Longsock would become. So your second question, what is Longsock? Longsock makes scent training easy, simple, and sustainable. And there's a couple things here. One is the ease. You can get a scent training kit on the internet, for sure. But it's really difficult to use because you're dealing with essential oils. You're supposed to be wearing gloves. There's a lot of concerns with cross contamination. And if you just think about it, you have a bottle of essential oils, you touch it with your hand touches the handle, and then you touch the couch. That all leaves the scent for your dog. And then they just get really confused, and it's a really complicated user journey. So then that's where kind of the ease and the simplicity comes from. The other piece of it is safety. Essential oil is actually toxic to dogs. And so you're never going to hear a casual dog parent that you'll find at the dog park who talks about using essential oils to train their dogs anything. Because in an unprofessional environment, that can be really dangerous to the dog. And so to me, it was really important to use things that, I'm not giving it to the trainers, I'm giving it to regular dog people, dog owners, dog moms, dog dads. I want to make sure that if their dog eats it, there's no concern about it. And that's where the safety piece comes in. And then the sustainability piece was very much important to me as far as the Longsock mission. I think I talked about it in my pitch in Project 2.8. I have like a pile of random pineapples and dog bones and hot chocolate cups and squirrels and parrots and all sorts of things that are just piled up in the corner that my dog played with a little bit, never touched again. And they just sit there. I've tried donating them. You can donate them to a local shelter. That's complicated as well. There's a lot of research involved in doing that. And so a lot of dog parents just end up with a massive amount of waste. And so the third pillar of Longsock is, how do we make this activity as sustainable as possible? And to me, that meant making the scent portion of the toy interchangeable, so that when the scent, your dog gets bored or the scent isn't as strong anymore, you can take it out, you compost it, because the whole thing is made out of herbs and cotton. There's no plastic in it. There's no grossness in it. And then put a new one in. So ideally, in the grand vision for the company, there is no waste being created during the life cycle of the product.
I mean, I love the way you describe things. It's been just, the last couple of minutes, such a joy to just, listen you talk, all these analogies and explanations. I mean, I will ask my next question, but before that, I might be just adding a maybe slightly silly question. You might think, oh, Orchun, you really ask this, but I kind of feel like I need to ask this because, I obviously, have been a dog parent for some years now. My mom would die for our dog. She is the primary caregiver. She wakes up with her. She goes to sleep with her. Our dog is my mom's 24/7. And I think, this is the same with every single pet owner. But, if you were to ask me, if you were to see me walking down the street, and if you would come up to me or to my mom and ask, Orchun, do you know what your dog and yourself could benefit from enrichment training if you were to provide that to your dog, or scent training? Can you also give a little brief, idea of why these concepts, these trainings are really important?
Yes, also an excellent question. So, and that also goes back to why I'm so laser focused on scent training specifically. It's kind of like a subset of a broader enrichment category. So I'll start broader. Enrichment was actually born in the zoos, and it was born as a broad umbrella term for activities you can do to zoo animals to not go crazy in their tiny enclosures. And fun fact, if you go to the Bronx Zoo in New York, you can actually find little plaques next to animal enclosures, and they'll tell you about the cool enrichment activities they do with their animals. And, they may spray a little bit of perfume in the corners because it's a new smell, and then the tigers will go and smell them. And the point of it is, there was giving animals things to do that they're missing out on by virtue of living in an enclosure. So that's how enrichment was born decades ago. The way that it applies to dogs today is we have seen in general in the pet market a trend towards making sure dogs have a better experience. I'm a millennial, and we're very much guilty of the dog lives in the house with me, the dog's allowed on furniture, the dog eats high quality diet, we go on daily walks, we go to the vet every single year, I brush my dog's teeth, and all of these things are good for our dogs. There's no question that they aren't. We're just finally doing them in the way that our parents, and especially our parents' parents, didn't necessarily do. My German Shepherd lived outside. So I think it's kind of like a broader trend of, we're bringing an animal into the very contained environment. And then we're asking them to follow our human rules. You're not allowed to eat out of the garbage. You're not allowed to go sniff the diaper pail of my little kid. Maybe you're not even allowed in the nursery. There are all these rules in place that are limiting what they're able to explore. And so then enrichment becomes super important. I would argue that it was a bit less important when the dog mostly lived outside, but now they're indoors with us. There's just less variety to their lives. And enrichment very much takes on the same meaning that it did in the zoo context, where you're just giving your dog stuff to do so they don't go crazy sitting in a corner on their bed. Like there's a lot of hours in a day, and there are only so many hours they're going to spend sleeping and eating. So what else are you giving them to do? And for some dogs, that may be walks. For other dogs, it may be playing a tug of war and other things inside the house. So I place scent training into that category of interactive training. That's kind of what that is. That's kind of why enrichment is important overall. Scent training specifically, I zeroed on because of the incredible benefits that the research shows it has for our dogs. So scent is of paramount importance to all animals, but dogs specifically. To kind of try and quantify how important that is, if we look at our human brain and we look at a dog brain and we look at the olfactory center, which is the part of the brain that is responsible for processing stimuli that comes in by sniffing it in. If we were to control for the size of the brain, for the volume of the brain, we're looking at a pea-sized in our brain, the area that's responsible for processing the scents. In a dog, that would be the size of a grapefruit. So just think about how much more brain space is dedicated to that on scents. And what does that mean? That means that dogs primarily rely on this sense to live their lives. An analogy I like to use here is if someone calls your name who's behind you, you're going to turn around and look. Because for humans, it's vision. For us, we process everything in a visual way. For dogs, it's how they smell you. So they don't need to turn around. They know who you are already. They don't need to look at you. They smell you coming from a mile away. And it's such a paradigm shift. And people just don't really understand that. Dogs can do incredible things with their scents. And the reason this becomes extremely important is for dogs that don't get to practice this skill, this part of the brain goes underutilized and it leads to not great outcomes. There's not a ton of research that shows what happens if you obviously prevent dog from sniffing, but there's tons of research that shows that regular sniffing every single day, there's this incredible paper done on dogs in a kennel environment. So a little bit different from a home, obviously, but it shows a statistical significant decrease in what they're calling stress behaviors. So barking, itching, pacing, all these things that are a sign of a stressor in a dog decrease if they just get a chance to sniff something every single day. Another study that I really, really love, it's a little bit more on the positive bias versus the lack of negative bias, is there's a study by Alexandra Horowitz at Columbia University that looks at positive bias in dogs. And so what does that mean? Let's break that down. The way they think about positive bias is, I'll simplify this so I don't bore people with the details of the study, but effectively, they're giving a dog a bowl that may or may not have food in it. And then they're seeing, is the dog going to go check it out? And the idea is, well, if the dog is generally, kind of like happy-go-lucky and feeling good, they're going to go check it out. Maybe there's some food in that bowl. And what they're seeing is they will bring in dogs, they will run this kind of exercise with them, then they send them home and they instruct the parents to do a scent training activity with their dog every day for a couple of weeks. And then they bring those dogs in. And what they showed is on their second visit, the dogs that did the scent training activity versus the dogs that just played with random toys have a positive increase in their optimism bias. So they're more likely to kind of go say, oh, all right, I wonder what's in that bowl. Let me go check that out. And so all of that paints this incredibly important picture of how important sniffing is to the dogs. And the last final piece of the puzzle is for all the dog parents out there who have super energetic labs, who can't spend hours and hours and hours taking their labs for a walk. I will remind you, if 40% of a dog's brain is dedicated to sniffing, it's actually a much more effective way to tire them out than to just run them back and forth on the street on a leash. And so there are all these, and this is something that is proliferated all over social media. 10 minutes of walking is as good as is, oh, like, sorry, 10 minutes of sniffing is as good as 30 minutes of walking. That has not been quantified. But what has been quantified is the incredible amount of brain power that it takes a dog to follow a scent to its destination. So kind of the last piece of the puzzle of why I focused on this particular kind of enrichment activity relates to a very common startup schema, which we actually learned in Project 2.8. You want a pain point in a solution, right? So you can position it well and market it appropriately. And to me, that was the angle, right? If you have, I interviewed a dog mom who had an extremely energetic lab, and I still remember the quote, and she does scent training, and she was saying, you know, if I don't have to stand there for 2 hours throwing the ball, that's a win to me. That's worth it. And that's very much the last kind of piece of the puzzle for why I went specifically after scent training with it, that enrichment.
The more I listen to you, the more I also realize it doesn't necessarily mean just because you love your dog so much, you are providing them maybe the best care and the best life they need and they require. Because I think, sometimes maybe not obviously purposefully, but sometimes the things that you think that are good for your dog is not necessarily the good things. And I think, being aware, being educated on these matters, and even I think, look, we've been discussing these, I've been listening to you for 20 minutes, and I think the amount of knowledge that I gained in terms of dog parenting is just increasing tremendously. And, it all sounds significantly valuable. And it just makes me more excited about, I think, Longsock's journey. And I just want to ask you, you repeatedly mentioned you talk with a lot of dog parents. And, before this session, I was looking at your website, which by the way, I love the designs, sketches really so much. Anybody listening this, please go ahead and take a look at the website as well. And, there are some quotes from recent customers. And I kind of want to lean towards that part and ask you a question about product market fit. You knocked on a lot of doors and you basically asked people some important questions about their relationships with their dogs. Do you recall any moment or couple of moments where you started saying to yourself, oh, business that I'm building under Longsock is actually really something resonating significantly with all the dog owners out there?
So, I don't think it resonates with all the dog owners out there. I think I can paint a couple pictures of the kind of dog parent that isn't right for this product. And that's okay, because I think for a young startup, it's really important to be, pun intended, dogmatic about defining your niche. And sure, by all means, have to stay flexible, open-minded, and I kind of want to touch on both. So for me, I went through an exercise where I interviewed a lot of dog parents, and then I defined 3 different ideal customer personas that would be interested, in my mind, in scent training. One was a hopeful problem solver. That's very much your standard problem solution approach where, maybe their dog is anxious, maybe their dog has separation anxiety, and, they're solving a very acute problem. Maybe that dog has too much energy. They're solving a problem, right? Like they're going to Google and they're saying, I have this problem, give me a solution. And that very much was born out of a theoretical need to have a problem that the startup addresses, because that's, entrepreneurship 101. 2 other ideal customer personas were actually, all of this was based on real interviews, but the personas, they interwoven with my own expectations of how Longsock could solve particular pain points. So the other 2 were less about a problem, a solution, and more about appealing to some kind of like an inner value that these folks might have. So it's the difference between you have pain, here's an Advil. There's very much a pill approach. And the other 2 ICPs were more on the vitamin, right? Like nothing's wrong with you, but life could be a little bit better if you took this particular vitamin. And so in that category, I've identified 2 different ones. One that is really into training. I fall into that category, right? I am very involved with my dog. He is super trained, can do all sorts of cool things. People are, complimenting me on how well he's behaved. I care about him learning new skills and tricks, and I would love to enroll him in an agility class. It paints a picture, right? That's me. Those are the people. There's a very different ICP, and that's my mom-in-law. It sounds like it may be your mom as well. They love their dog to bits. Their dog sleeps in bed with them. Their dog eats the best food. If they're getting beef, it's getting microwaved first. They're not eating cold beef. That's ridiculous. You wouldn't want to eat cold beef. And they love their dogs. And that's a very different demographic, and you market it very differently. So you asked me, how did you know that? I don't remind me what was the specific wording that you used?
I mean, resonation, I would say, when was
Right.
that moment?
Right. And so for me, it resonates differently with different ICPs. And that's really important because that ends up playing into how you position your product. And it was actually a big struggle with Longsock because when I was building the website, thank you for the compliments, by the way, I did most of it myself, so I really appreciate it. The challenge that I ran into was, well, how do I communicate three very different value propositions, right? I started with the pain solution approach. A lot of the website was all about, is your dog anxious? Does your dog have too much energy? Scent training can help. And I just wasn't seeing the market response that I was hoping to see. It wasn't resonating with the right customers. Something wasn't really working. And so that's when I shifted to what it is today, which is, hey, this thing is pretty cool for dogs, and it's a cool training activity. And now I would say it does double duty 50-50 on the kind of the training enthusiast ICP, which is me and some other folks, but also just the people that love their dogs and want to give them the best thing that they can give them.
I see. And hold on, I've been actually also curious. We've been talking about, I would say, not necessarily the positive things, but I think, these are all, we acquire thanks to you, all these information and, the progress and development of Longsock. If I were to ask you about the challenges, like what have been, what are the things that are keeping you up at night besides your, newborn?
What a good question. There's a joke that goes, first time founders worry about the product, second time founders worry about distribution. I would say I've gone through that arc myself. At the beginning, if I think back to 2 years ago, I was so laser focused on the product, right? The scent training kit that I make. It was, what color should the ribbon be? What should I make the toy of? Should it be denim? Should it be fleece? What color does it need to be? How do I design this box? Like, I was so obsessed with creating the most delightful, seamless, fun customer experience. And at some point, an old started to knock on my door, which is nothing happens in business until you sell something. And again, I think this is a common thing that happens to first-time founders. This is your baby. This is your passion project. You want to make it perfect before anybody sees it. And so for me, it was actually that transition from, okay, the product is good. I'm happy with it. Now I gotta go and sell it. And in my mind, if the product is perfect, people will come. And that is not true, or at least not in my experience. Your product could be amazing. It could be solving a very specific problem. And if nobody knows about it, then nobody's going to buy it. So for me, that was the hardest and continues to be the hardest thing. How do I get this scent training kit in the hands of the people that need them, so they can give them to their dogs? And it's been a journey. I have tried a lot of different things. I have tried word of mouth. I have tried social media. I have tried pay-per-click. I recently went into wholesale partnerships, everything under the sun. And that continues to be the biggest challenge for a company like ours.
I feel totally optimistic, but I also get your point as well. So, I mean, it's been some time, and I also don't want to take all your time, obviously, but I have one more question left, and that is more about the future of Longsock, with all these things, developing, progressing, challenges, solutions, iterations. Like, what is your vision for the next 5 years, let's say? And also, how do you, apart from Longsock, what do you think scent training will evolve in the pet care industry? Right after this, I will immediately call my mom and I will say, look, mom, I learned bunch of new things for our baby. We gotta iterate our approach. But do you think might there also be a future where it is not me calling my mom, but my mom calling me and being like, "Oh, Fortune, I've been hearing this new thing. What is this?"
Yes, I am optimistic. There's a lot of incredible companies out there doing really good work in other areas of dog wellness and specifically mental enrichment. The angle they typically take is more training focused. The market is bigger. If you go up a notch and kind of tackle all training, there is a lot of, AI powered apps to help you train your dog at home. There's a lot of kind of education and content companies that are delivering really good enrichment tips and tricks and frankly just educating the customers and dog owners about the importance of it. So I'm very optimistic that the future is really bright for our dogs. How Longsock fits into it? For now, I want to stay core to our true mission of scent training. There's a lot of work to be done. The main priority for the next year is to go into retail channels. A lot of dog parents prefer to shop in retail. They like to see the product and they're opportunistic buyers. And so it's much easier to find them when they're browsing around. So that's the biggest priority for the next year. For the next 3 to 5 years, I would love to expand the product line. I hear a lot of feedback that folks whose dogs really love to get into their toys don't feel comfortable with the soft toy that we currently sell. So I already see a need to have something maybe made out of hard rubber. I need to find an angle to make that sustainable because that is one of our core pillars that I don't want to compromise on. So that'll be a really fun challenge of finding a way to make it really hard for a dog to chew through and destroy, but still, made sustainably. Maybe it's ocean recycled rubber. I'm not sure yet. So that's going to be really, really important. And look, by the time I've tackled the retail side and I've tackled the kind of the hard chewer side, that's where I would look to expand beyond just scent training. But we're talking years down the line. I think there's a lot of different products that dogs need to live their best lives as far as their mental health goes. And I know that right now the market, and I'm talking about venture capital kind of landscape in general, is a lot more focused on SaaS businesses, e-commerce enablement businesses, anything AI powered. And I understand that. But we at Longsock believe that you can't train your dog with just a software and you can't make them happy with any kind of an AI tool. They need you and they need you engaging with them the right way. So beyond scent training, there is a ton of different interactive training products that I want to introduce to help. Like ultimately, we do this why? Because we want the dog to be happy. And the dog will never be happy if they don't get time with their mom or dad. That's like the most important thing. And so in that category of mental enrichment that involves both you and your dog, lots of other things we can do. And so the long-term vision is to become a powerhouse of physical products that make it really easy for you as a dog owner to spend that super quality time with your dog. That's the vision.
Natalia, thank you so much. It was such a joyful experience for me to, listen to you. And, you were not a total stranger for me, obviously, but I realized, in the last couple of minutes that I think thanks to this session, I got to know you a lot more because I was unaware of, this beautiful connection and energy that you carry towards what you do. I mean, maybe saying I wasn't aware would be misleading, but I wasn't aware to the degree that I am now, which I think is, it's been such a joyful experience for me to listen you share your journey. And thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Arjun. It's been really, really fun.